Good morning, everybody. I'm Councillor Boyd Elliott, the Chair of the committee, and I'd like to welcome you all to the meeting of the Open Review Committee. Yeah, we're going. Yeah, we are live stream. That is being broadcast live and recorded for publication. Okay. Apologies for absence.
Thank you. I've got apologies from Councillor Shaw for medical illness.
Okay. And Councillor Roger Jackson should be joining us. Yeah, he's had his some treatment this morning. So. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. If any councillor, does that sound really tinny?
Yeah.
Echo. Following it, isn't it? It's. Let's see if that's
a bit
better. Okay. Yeah, if any councillor or officer has an interest in any matter on the agenda, you should declare it now. Please raise your hand if you have an interest to declare. If you have an interest to declare, you should state what type of interest it is and give brief details. No. Okay. We'll just go straight to agenda item 3. There's no minutes of the last meeting because it was so recent. Okay. So they'll come next time. We have 2 sets. So go to agenda item 3, which is the East Midlands Combined County Authority, EMCCA, and it's to receive an update. And I'll hand over to Derek Higdon, the Executive Director of Place, to introduce the report. Thank you. Over to you, Derek.
Chairman, morning, members. So yes, this report really, I think, offers the committee an opportunity to kind of survey the council's relationship, developing relationship with EMCCA. So I'll walk members through the kind of structure of the report and the key points that we make within it. But this very much takes the form, as the chairman has suggested, of a bit of a briefing, bit of an update as to exactly where we are in that developing relationship, where we are in that journey in the East Midlands around devolution. So we start off in the paper just providing a bit of a reminder for members of how we've got to the point of having that combined authority for EMCCA and the benefits that were envisaged through the devolution deal back in 2022-2023 on through the election of the Mayor, Claire Ward, in May of this year. And we also then move on to describing the kind of core purpose of the combined authority as it currently stands. Of course, that might start to shift as the white paper on English devolution is published, hopefully early next week. But at the moment, the combined authority, as is the case in other parts of the country, is very much in a kind of economic growth and regeneration space, if you like. Those are the core elements that constitute the combined authority, along with transport responsibilities too. So we describe the kind of core purpose, the core ambitions, if you like, of the combined authority. And we go on then to talk about how the governance arrangements work for the combined authority as well. I suppose the core point to make in that respect is that combined authority is comprised of 4 constituent authorities: ourselves, Nottingham City Council, Derbyshire County Council, and Derby City Council too. So when I'm talking about the combined authority, it's very easy to slip into the language of they and it, when in actual fact the combined authority is an us, and we are part, as the council, of the combined authority. And I think that's a really important point to emphasise from this council's perspective. So we are party to its decisions, and therefore we're also party to and part of its governance arrangements. So the report details the elected members that we have that represent the council on the various committees that discharge the functions of EMCCA, and we also describe within the report the overview and scrutiny arrangements that EMCCA has itself as well. So as a discrete local authority, then EMCCA has its own overview and scrutiny functions as well. And I suppose that speaks to the role, to a certain extent, of this committee being not necessarily to scrutinise EMCCA, but to scrutinise and take a view on this council's relationship with EMCCA, which is why the paper is constructed in the way that it is. The paper talks about funding as well, and you'll know from the debates and conversations that have happened in previous meetings with the council and elsewhere that the devolution deal was originally anticipated to bring in about £1.5 billion worth of additional funding over a 30-year period, loosely broken down as £38 to £39 million a year, split between revenue and capital. But what the paper starts to articulate, and if you were to look at the papers for the EMCCA board that have been published this morning, you'll see a significant upshift in resources and finances that are flowing into EMCCA from the start of the next financial year. So what was in the original devolution deal in 2022-23 is already shifting significantly. Just as a couple of examples of that, we're starting to see more investment in public transport in the new financial year through BSIP, Bus Service Improvement Programme. We're starting to see additional investment in some particular skills funding programmes as well. And we're also starting to see significant investment. It's hard to clarify exactly what form that investment will take, subject to the spending review in March, but we're starting to see the prospect of significant investment in infrastructure too. So if you look at the budget papers for EMCCA that have been published today, you'll see that its revenue budget, I think, has gone from something like £20 million in the current year, and it will go to around about £80 million in the next financial year. And there's a similar shift, similar jump, if you like, in capital funding. And I think that's really significant, not just because it's pointed to the direction of travel for much government funding, whether it's highways or transport or infrastructure going forward, but it also speaks to the size of the likely investment that's going to come into the East Midlands as a result of the construction and the establishment of EMCCA. It's given us access to funds on a regional basis that we might otherwise not have had access to. And of course, that's one of the original drivers for devolution in the first place. So quite a bit in there around finance. I suppose the other key element of the paper is, okay, great, so what does that mean in terms of Nottinghamshire's core priorities, core asks, if you like, of the combined authority? And what I've done there is attach for you a copy of the Cabinet report that went to November's Cabinet that sets out the County Council's core asks, core collaborative missions, if you like, for its work with EMCCA. And the appendix covers off and describes in some detail exactly what those asks and missions are. And they're in the realms of public transport, health and economy, jobs and skills, communities, and education as well. And there's and they range from the fairly specific investment in this road or that programme into areas that are a little bit more long term and harder to define in terms of specific actions, but do speak to that evolving and developing relationship between the council and EMCCA. I'll close there. Obviously happy to take questions and comments from members, and also just to thank Emily, one of our graduate trainees, who helped me with the construction of the paper and who's here today with us.
Thank you for that, Derek. Okay. Before I open up for debate, I'm going to move the recommendation set out on page 9 of the bundle. Seconded. Thank you. Open up for any questions. Councillor Fold.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that, Derek, and welcome, Emily. Thank you for what you've done on this. I mean, the key thing I want to raise here is around the fact that this is devolution, so we need to make sure we really keep the local voice going, don't we, really? Because what we don't want, which has always been my worry about devolution, and this isn't a party political statement, is that we don't want the mayor just speaking to Westminster, do we? We want to make sure that actually it is from bottom up. The questions are kind of broadly around that one. So, first of all, how are we going to keep this link between elected members and residents? And what benefits will residents with the collaboration of co-working with EMCCA deliver? What is it that we can do from listening to our residents and then kind of seeing it kind of happen in terms of the combined authority? The other thing I wanted to raise as well is, if you look on page 5, those committees are very, very helpfully kind of listed on there, but between paragraphs 11 to 15. How are we going to get, and where is it going to go to in terms of regular feedback, in terms of what progress is being made? Because scrutiny is happening here, it's happening there. It'd be nice to kind of get some sort of, I don't know, link between the two. I don't know what that would look like, but I think, there's no point kind of doing scrutiny here and then it having no impact on stuff that's going on at EMCCA if that needs to happen. So it'd be good to kind of see how what is going. I mean, I get dribs and drabs. I think we all do get dribs and drabs of feedback, depending on what individuals we know and kind of who we know at the county. But it'd be good to have a really good framework and regular kind of feedback delivery. But it wasn't too onerous, just kind of so we can kind of keep track of actually what's going on with them and how that chimes with what we're doing here.
Thank you, Kate. Derek, do you want to pick that up?
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Councillor Fole. Just to pick up on that first question, then I suppose, as I mentioned in the introduction to the report, the fact that the council and councillors are represented on EMCCA through our membership of the various committees is obviously the key driver, if you like, of that link between the local and the regional, and that's our formal opportunity to shape and influence the decisions, the direction, the strategy, and the policy framework for EMCCA. I think it's worth just to pick that apart a little bit. If I gave the example of public transport, for example, that's one of the, in fact, it's the only area of responsibility that this council currently has that is being transitioned upwards, if you like. Devolution is a downwards thing. I don't know what the opposite of that is, but
Evolution.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed, something evolution, so public transport will be transitioned by April 26th at the latest upwards. So that means this council will not be responsible for public transport in Nottinghamshire in the way that it is now. So it's worth members being aware of the fact that what that means is that elected members will not be locally accountable for public transport in the way that they are at the moment. Instead, there will be a regional passenger transport authority, an executive, if you like. So I suppose it's worth kind of noting that shift. I think for other things, I think the challenge is, and this links, I think, to your second question, Councillor Fole, around how do we ensure that the broader group of members is kept up to speed with the work that EMCCA does, because as EMCCA grows, as that budget grows, as it employs more staff and it becomes more central to our region, it's absolutely the case that its activities will become many more and more varied, and there'll be a lot more kind of going on, if you like. So I think that's a legitimate ask for us as officers to start to think about how we can ensure that the wider council, the wider group of elected members, are kept up to speed with what I think is already becoming quite a significant body of work that EMCCA are embarking upon and will deliver on. And if we envisage from April 26th EMCCA being that's something that, whilst members might not have direct responsibility for, they'll absolutely be really interested in and will still want to potentially be in the conversation. So I think that is something for us to think about, and now is probably the right time for us to start to do that. And mechanism for feeding back to all members on the work, if you like, of EMCCA. I suppose the other thing to say is, of course, EMCCA has that responsibility too. It isn't just this council that needs to ensure that its members and local people are aware of the work that it does. EMCCA has that responsibility as well, and I suppose it's incumbent upon us as a council to press that.
I just wanted to come back. I mean, I suppose there might be one or two test questions that I might want to ask at this stage. And I realise this is a new culture and we've got to get used to the fact that actually the responsibilities kind of are changing. But if I was to ask a question, then okay, I mean, not asking you necessarily to answer this now. You know, if Mr. and Mrs. Smith kind of say, okay, why is our bus route? We desperately need, or if a petition of 1,000 Beeston people say, I want a new bus, why is this bus service stopped? How could I get that message through to say this is the residents in my area actually want to change this kind of bus service and actually make it better? How would that get through once EMCCA has that responsibility? That would be kind of like a test-like question for me.
Thank you. So, I suppose a parallel question might be if residents were to petition you about a district council function at the moment as a county councillor, how might you feed that into the district council as it has responsibility for whatever function it might be? Normally, I suspect that would involve you linking with the relevant district councillor and taking that initiative forward in that way. I think in this case, if I use transport as the example, it's likely to be, and it could be the case that that petition is made, is drawn to the attention of the relevant elected members who represent us on the Transport and Connectivity Committee, as it's currently described, so that we can make representation through that committee. But it's very much, Councillor Fuller, a work in progress. Because of course it could easily be the case that that petition is best directed not at this council but at EMCCA directly.
Just to come back on it as well, Kate, it's EMCCA's new, very new. My role on the overview and scrutiny there, one of the biggest issues we've had so far is finding venues and all around the East Midlands. So what we've decided on now is just to have Chesterfield and Rushcliffe. So we've got the polar ends of the county. So councillors know where they're going, but also that residents can come in and petition, or it's a public meeting. They can attend the meeting and ask questions of overview. So they know where they're going. Bit of money for the chairman's charity there, Councillor Kerry. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. So it is new, but that's how you'd feed into it. Do that. We could do it through members that are on there. Okay. Councillor Creamer.
Yeah, bullet point A, the Inclusive Growth Commission. I'm just wondering how actually reactive that is, and what kind of input we have as a region, either at Nottingham or Nottinghamshire. And the reason I'm asking how reactive it is, there could be grants for their various things. I mean, I think the 40 million bus grant was a bit of a surprise. So within that, will we have projects that may or may not be ready on that growth agenda? So I'm just wondering basically how reactive it is and what kind of input we will have as Nottinghamshire. I mean, I know it's four of us as well, but just wondering exactly how it will work, how we will feed into it, and as it's just been said, how they will feed back as well.
Thanks, Councillor Creamer. So I think the first thing perhaps to say around the Inclusive Growth Commission is that it's kind of self-determining. So it's not quite autonomous because, of course, it's been commissioned by the Mayor, by the combined authority, but it's been given a defined piece of work to identify, if you like, a long-term growth strategy, inclusive growth strategy for the East Midlands. And its membership has been recently announced and is available publicly, and that membership is from local, regional and national experts who bring something to that commission, bring something to the conversation. It isn't a place it isn't a commission that is populated at a political level or by political representatives, but the commission through Andy Haldane, who is ex-Bank of England but is chief executive of the Royal Society of Arts at the moment, and it's the RSA that will organise and staff and do the work on behalf of the commission. The commission will report back on an interim basis to the board of the combined authority in the spring of next year, with its final report to be published, I think, later in 2025. So our opportunity to shape that is through the combined authority and through the work that the commission itself will do, that's yet to be defined, that will engage with local stakeholders at a local level. And I would expect and anticipate that some of that stakeholder engagement will be directly with constituent councils and councillors as well, as local representatives. But that work is yet to be fully formed and emerge from being something that's kind of conceptual into something that's practical at this stage. I think the commission had its first meeting last week, for example, so a long way to go yet.
So, yeah, thanks for that. The concern was the left and right hand, with the commission saying one thing, us not being as involved and making promises they couldn't keep, or this, that, and the other. So it's important that it gets off jointly, correctly. So that was a concern about a commission saying one thing and then, well, that's not realistic, or we can't do it.
Okay. Thank you, Jim. Councillor Billy Horan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Councillor Fold has substantially covered perhaps my concerns, but I want to thank Derek for clarifying something that I was harangued on the doorstep in the last couple of weeks by an angry gentleman, or elderly gentleman, who seemed to blame me for creating EMCCA, and demanding to know what difference it makes, and in the 7 months that it's been established. But a substantial amount of money, then that kind of explains the process, and I suspect it's going to be towards a year before we see any impact on residents' lives. But Mr. Chairman, I think it is important that strategic decisions going on and off. It's important that through the decisions that affect residents are somehow communicated through this council or this committee or whatever, because, for example, the Bingham transport route, public transport route, is I understand quite profitable. It's extremely busy. Every 15 minutes there's full buses going up and down the 52, but bus services such as the 141 going from the city right through communities up to Sutton in Ashfield is a valuable service that perhaps is less attractive to commercial operators, but as this gentleman told me as a regular user, it is absolutely vital to particularly a retired community. So I did promise him that I would raise this issue. If I may, Mr. Chairman, the question I will ask is on behalf of my colleague who's not able to come this morning because of a dental appointment. Exactly a year ago, this council announced a series of bus route enhancements using funding allocated from the government's bus service improvement plan to reintroduce the Connect evening service to the estates around Hucknall. Apparently, I don't remember it myself, but he says this was announced with great fanfare, but a year on, residents in Hucknall are still awaiting the return of the service. Councillor Shaw has championed the return of the Hucknall Connect evening service, and it was his number one priority in the councillors' bus consultation carried out by Cabinet Member for Highways, Councillor Clark. Is anyone at fault? Whose fault is it that this has been delayed? Is it Nottinghamshire County Council? Is it the Executive Mayor of EMCCA? Or is it the government? Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Horan. So just to pick up your kind of points, if you like, in turn, it absolutely is the case that much of the work of EMCCA over the first 6 or 7 months of its operations has been around getting established. So the mayor was only elected in May. Lots of recruitment is happening at the moment at a senior level and at a more operational level. So the organisation is growing quickly, as you said, and as I mentioned, the budget is also now growing quickly. So it's trying to get into that space of not being a startup, if you like, and into an organisation that is starting to deliver. And I think you're absolutely right. We'll see that in the coming year or so. As far as transport is concerned, it's I suppose a point to make is that, and you can see this to a certain extent in the BSIP announcements that have been made in the last few weeks. The ambition for public transport in our region, which has been a contested and a constrained space financially for the last few years, and here in Nottinghamshire we're much better served in terms of public transport availability than is the case in many other county areas of the country. The aspiration is not that we take our current set of services across the region and kind of amalgamate them through the mayor and kind of continue and make the best of it. The ambition really is that we use the establishment of EMCCA as the Regional Transport Authority to generate much more investment and economies of scale in public transport, to therefore drive improvements. More bus services available to more people in more communities, more often on a regular basis. Now, I think it's important that we don't lose sight that that's the ambition, and you'll see that writ large in the cabinet paper that members consider or cabinet considered last month. The intention and the ambition of EMCCA is to improve and extend public access to public transport, whether that's buses or other means of public transport as well. Rail being one area where I think we don't have a regional voice at the moment that the mayor will absolutely step into in due course, and we'll all have a view, won't we, around quality, availability of our railway services in the East Midlands. So I think the ambition there is to improve and extend, I suppose, is the core point. As far as the specific issue around Hucknall is concerned, what I'll do is I'll take that question away, and I'll ask colleagues in our transport team to go back to Councillor Shaw in the next few days.
Thank you, Derek. Councillor Guilford.
Thank you, Derek. When you were talking about the ways to get members information, and you've mentioned a couple of times that the website, and there's a load of information that's already coming out of EMCCA. I just wondered whether we can have a spot, and I had a quick look while I was here just now to see what was on the members hub, and I think it would be good if we could have a direct link onto the members hub, perhaps with the meetings and whatever sectioned out, so that we can access that information and the papers quickly, because clearly, there are going to be links. I mean, my personal view on you talked about local accountability, and we are, whether it's a district issue, the members, or county, or even whether it's going to be an EMCCA issue, members of the public don't differentiate. You're there. It could be a matter for the member of parliament. They expect us to deal with that issue, and sometimes they expect you to follow it through. It doesn't matter even if you pass it on to another colleague or another councillor. They want, they came to you with the original, and I'm just wondering whether we could look at it, because of it's new and everything else, whether that within our petitions that could still continue, and if it's one for EMCCA, we pass it on to the chairman, but he makes sure it gets through to the mayor. That's part of the process, so that is gone through. Because in reality, not being disrespectful to Overview Committee here, but I mean, we wouldn't deal with petitions at Overview unless it was sent from the relevant cabinet member. It would initially go to the cabinet member, and in this case, it's the mayor. So I think we as members would want a route where we could, if people have got a petition, some way in which we could show the people, well, we've done that. And I think that by us being able to present a petition here to the chairman, who then says that will go on to the mayor, and then we could work with the mayor to even get a feedback through, like we do on our petitions. That will cut probably a bit of work out for them as well, so I think processes like that need to be looked at, but in particular the information wise, just to make it easier. So I'm not sat trying to find out the relevant website, if it can be put onto the members hub so that we can access that data.
Embedded.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Guilford. Yes, I'm sure we can look at putting something on the members hub so that you can access the papers. EMCCA is going through a process of kind of extending and improving its publication arrangements for papers, because it had a few teething problems with that kind of stuff early on. But yes, so if we can do that, then that will is a kind of single point of access, if you like, for information on EMCCA. As far as the kind of processes that you mentioned are concerned, absolutely, we can look at all of those things, and there's something to be taken, isn't there, from those parts of the country that have currently got combined authorities, and in our case, upper tier authorities as well. And how do they do it? So that's something to work through. What I would say, as far as transport is concerned, because that's the kind of conversation of the day, is that the powers that this council has for transport will be concurrent with the combined authority, i.e. we'll both have those powers, public transport powers, between now and April 2026. It's in April 26 that our powers, statutory powers around transport, cease, and they become solely those held by the combined authority. So that gives us a healthy period of time to make sense of what the new system will look like.
Councillor Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Apologies for being a bit late. I don't know quite whether you've covered it before I came in or not, but as a county, we're going to have to compete with 3 other, like 2 cities and Derbyshire, for funding, everything else. So how do we actually, for infrastructure and things like that, do we actually bid into it, or do we prove the need for it, or is there fair distribution of all this funding into the counties? It'd be interesting to know how that is. And also, as a second bit, it looks like we're going down from this government unity route of governance now, so another fundamental change in the governance of this area. Is that going to have any effect, or is it going forward in the future?
Thanks, Councillor Jackson. Short question, but a lot in it. So as far as kind of influence is concerned, I suppose from an officer perspective, what we're working quite hard with EMCCA colleagues to do is to not generate a kind of bidding culture for EMCCA, so that when funds get awarded to EMCCA from government for, in particular areas of policy or delivery, that it becomes a bit of a, well, who's going to write the best bid? It becomes a bit of an industry, because I think the view here is that if we can influence EMCCA to establish a clear strategic framework and clear priorities, then the choices that it then makes about how it uses its funding become clearer, and some of that it'll choose therefore to spend some of that funding in Nottinghamshire, but will still have a regional benefit, and it will choose to spend some of its funding outside of Nottinghamshire as well. So I think our kind of work at the moment is focused on ensuring that the interests of Nottinghamshire and our residents are best represented through that kind of regional lens. And if we can influence EMCCA to establish clear priorities that work for Nottinghamshire, then resource will be directed into Nottinghamshire accordingly. For example, and I'm sorry to keep referring back to EMCCA's board papers that have been published today, because I really appreciate that you might not have seen them. But in the EMCCA board papers today, there are proposals to invest £9.5 million of capital that it has this year in a small number of major strategic initiatives that fit within its developing policy framework around infrastructure, local growth and regional growth. And one of those is related to the work that has been discussed many times in this chamber around STEP and how we can do more work to unlock a significant inward investment in North Nottinghamshire around STEP and the former coal-fired power stations in that area. So there's a proposal in that paper to invest several £1 million in more work to unlock that opportunity. And I think that's a really good example of work that we've done as a county council to influence EMCCA to make choices around investment in things that really will make a long-term difference to the economic future of our county, rather than influencing EMCCA to set up a bidding culture whereby we just take our chances and put a bid in for STEP, for example, because that can sometimes result in those that shout the loudest getting the most money. And I think we want a more mature region than that. As far as devolution is concerned in the white paper, I'm in the same place as everybody else is, I suppose, waiting for it to be published, and then we'll go from there. But it looks as though, doesn't it, from a lot of the national conversations that are happening, that we'll increasingly see powers and responsibilities transferred to at least a regional basis, and that will start to have an impact on the landscape at a more local basis as well. But I think we're really in the space of waiting and seeing until next week.
Councillor Introna.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think my question was not too dissimilar from Councillor Jackson's, but I'll try and ask it in a slightly different context. Thanks for the report, Derek, and thank you, Emily, for joining us this morning. We've passed the half-year point already of year one, and no doubt we'll close in pretty quickly on the first anniversary, especially with all the things that will be going off in the counties over the next few months. I was going to ask, what are the methodologies used and the representations already made to the Mayor and to EMCCA to ensure that Nottinghamshire, the regions, are represented fairly and that we get a fair allocation of resources? I'd secondly just like to ask as well, when, in your opinion, might we see evidence of investment in the region, and what areas do you think we might see it first? Now, you've mentioned STEP, so I accept that point, but you said that was just part of a 9.3 million investment, which, when we look at the whole pot, is a quarter of what's available in this first year. So I'm just wondering, I mean, STEP's a pretty obvious thing that I would expect EMCCA and the Mayor to get involved with, but in terms of what we might deem as typical needs of the regions, where do you think that might manifest itself? Thank you.
Thank you. It's worth bearing in mind as I answer this question that I'm not the Mayor. Yeah, indeed. As far as kind of investment is concerned, there are a number of funding streams that will come through EMCCA that reflect kind of a redirection of previous funding routes that would come direct to the county council. So a good example would be highways related allocations. Highways capital funding will in future, and it has been doing this year actually from quarter 2, will in future come through the combined authority to our county council, and at least in the initial phase of that, the funding formula that the DFT applied to local road funding will be passported straight through EMCCA. So the kind of funding that we've, or the funding proportions that we get in comparison with a county like Derbyshire will be exactly the same as they have been previously, and that they are largely based on road length and some other kind of condition related metrics. As far as public transport is concerned, likewise, we've talked this morning about BSIP monies and new BSIP monies. It's unclear at the moment as to whether the kind of numbers that government have talked about, and it's about £40 million figure for the East Midlands, includes previous BSIP related allocations. My sense is that it probably does, so that actually what the uplift represents is about £20 million of additional funding, and a mix of capital and revenue. The criteria for dispersing that, for distributing that, is yet to be determined by EMCCA. So we'll have the opportunity through the Transport and Connectivity Board to exert influence on that, and that's a board that is chaired by the leader of the council. So we've got a good opportunity to exert local influence on that. More broadly, I think one of the, and I touched on it in answering Councillor Jackson's questions, I suppose one of the interesting things for us to contemplate as a council is, does advantage accrue to our place, our county or our district or our town only if investment goes directly into that place, that district, that town? Or are there examples of significant level, particularly to regional level, significant investment that have a region-wide advantage? And STEP is absolutely in that space because it could be advantageous to residents in Derbyshire as well as Nottinghamshire, and Nottingham as well as Nottinghamshire. So I suppose there's something about how we kind of think about investment through that sort of lens as well as through the local lens. So for investment in services, highways, transport, it's absolutely right that we will need to kind of ensure that we get an equitable, fair deal, if you like. And again, that's touched upon in the Cabinet paper. I think for broader infrastructure investment, particularly as EMCCA gets into a space in the coming years where that investment could be really, really significant, we perhaps might need to think about how we look at value, not just through a very specific local lens, but also through a wider lens as well. And then lastly, Mike, in terms of that question around how do we kind of judge impact, I think that's still to be determined. I think there's a lot of work to be done by EMCCA to establish impact of investment that it's going to make, because those large-scale investments have not yet come to pass.
Happy with that, Mike? Are you coming back for more?
Can I come back with just one sub-question, please?
Yeah, of course you can.
Thank you, Derek. We've heard a lot of talk of we're in the first year, we need to look at this, we need to look at that, still setting up. In many organisations, even if you set up a new company, you haven't got a year to talk about stuff. What can we do as an authority? Because I would have expected whoever came in as mayor would have some vision, some strategy of what they wanted to do. There are clearly other devolved authorities around the country where there are quick learnings, if you like. But I dare say there's good and bad. But what are we doing, and what can we do to influence the ability of EMCCA to actually start delivering, rather than spend the first year or so talking? Thank you.
Thank you. I think as far as the startup question is concerned, if we look at an organisation like Greater Manchester Combined Authority, for 8 or 9 years before that, the constituent authorities in Greater Manchester had established a really good track record of collaborating and joint working, and that involved the establishment of a kind of Greater Manchester Passenger Transport Authority. So when the Combined Authority was established back in 2014, I think it was, they weren't a start-up. They were kind of already semi-formed. I think we are in a very different place to that, and a very different place to most brand new start-up combined authorities, because of course we're the first county combined authority in the country. So we're treading, or we're in uncharted waters to a certain extent. That notwithstanding, it's absolutely the case that it's imperative that gets it into a delivery space and a doing business space as quickly as possible, and that's why both at a political level through the committees, that refrain of when are we going to start doing stuff is absolutely being heard across the region by all constituent authorities at a political level, and it's something that we're seeking to influence at an officer level as well, partly by ensuring that EMCCA invests funding that it does have in growing its capacity, because it needs people to do things, and partly by ensuring that its policy framework is very much focused on delivery, doing things, as opposed to planning to do things. But it's an evolving story. Hindsight's a wonderful thing, but it's absolutely the case that with the benefit of that, if EMCCA could have got ahead of the game in terms of some of its recruitment prior to the election of the mayor in May, then that would have certainly been helpful. We've got to bear in mind, of course, that the post of mayor is such a pivotal one that it's totally understandable why any embryonic organisation would want to wait until that figurehead is in place before really kind of pressing on.
Thank you, Derek.
Thank you. Councillor Carr?
Right, where do I start? I've got a theory why the white paper on the local government reorganisation has been delayed. I do know, because I've heard it directly from Labour councillors, is that a lot of unhappy Labour councillors across the country, and I would imagine there'd be quite a few Liberal Democrats, Conservatives, and Independents who aren't happy either. But that's other issue. The same people will be very unhappy this morning about Angela Rayner's aimed takeover of local policy decisions. You know, we seem to be going to a very centralised country, and I don't like it at all. I nailed my colours to the mast that I've always been against the EMCCA, and I think you're doing a fantastic job, Derek. You obviously know your stuff, but wouldn't it have been nice for us to actually be able to question the mayor this morning? I just cannot see how scrutiny of EMCCA is going to happen without directly elected members to EMCCA. Oh, I've gone off now. I just can't see how it's going to work, because at the end of the day, each ruling party of the constituent and it's the boroughs and of course districts as well as the four top tier authorities. I mean, how many representatives from Nottinghamshire are there from the Labour group and the Independent group? No. And that's happening right across Nottinghamshire. And these are the same people that were against the European Union because it was undemocratic when it had a directly elected parliament. But anyway, we'll move on. Let's move back to transport. And I think we've invented a brilliantly new.
Councillor, Jason Zardrozny's on.
Sorry,
on the scrutiny. Jason Zardrozny's on the scrutiny of EMCCA.
Well, yeah, through Ashfield Council, not through this authority.
Through the county council.
Oh, okay, that's fine then. One then,
And Councillor Hollis is on the.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so we actually got a meeting with the mayor.
Okay, I stand corrected. Transport then, I think we've invented a new word, haven't we, this morning? Undevolution. It's like anti-disestablishmentarianism, but shorter. I can tell you now that the bus service improvement plan at Nottingham City, not this county, Nottingham City, they are sitting on their fund and will not release it ahead of their statutory duties being transferred to EMCCA. And I know that, and I'm sure that other councillors, particularly Hucknall, we've already heard from, my division borders onto the city and we share a lot of the buses, and there's just no money coming forward. That can't be said of our county council. I had a meeting only last week with officers talking about bus routes in my division. But
you know, this is a retrograde step, in my opinion. Things should be done as near to the population as possible when it comes to decision making. And this is one that's gone back and isn't, in my opinion, democratically controlled. Infrastructure plans you're talking about, and transport infrastructure plans and roads. I just wonder whether the A614 is going to be in that funding, because if it is, then we can't call that new money because it was already promised to us. But that's an issue that we can debate. And I just really do think that my residents don't understand why this has happened. It's not East Midlands, it's Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire. Leicester City and Leicestershire didn't want to be part of it. Northamptonshire couldn't be part of it because it's financial problems. I just cannot understand why, if the government had the money available to give to EMCCA, why it just didn't give that money to the 4 primary authorities and not have all this extra bureaucracy that we've got at the top. I'm sorry that I've been trying to be as positive as I can, but I just can't see how this is going to work in the future democratically. Thank you.
Your positivity is practically covering us all. Derek, do you want to come back? I don't think it was a question. I think it was a comment. Yeah.
There was lots of political points there. No. Don't expect Derek to answer those.
No. We will note your comments. Okay. Councillor Owen, do you have a question?
Well, not specifically a question, I suppose. I'm just going to echo what people have said. I'm grateful to Derek for producing this report with his able assistant. This is the second time I've sat through a presentation on EMCCA. I sat through one provided by EMCCA for their governance committee a couple of weeks or so ago, a Teams meeting. 2 hours of my life I won't get back, but there we are. It was interesting, and I have to say I have grave concerns about the way things are going. I suppose perhaps I was naive, but I never envisaged a bureaucracy of the sort that has been set up. Councillor Foles started with duplication. And don't we have duplication in local government now in Nottinghamshire? It's ludicrous. It's chaotic. It's nonsense. My area of Nuttall and Kimberley has 4 tiers now of local government. Parish, district, county, and now this amorphous East Midlands combined council authority, whatever it goes under. Now, how can you justify that? It really is an utter nonsense, and I do hope this new devolution bill is going to come in and sweep away at least 1 tier of local government, preferably, I have to say, the districts, and that the counties become unitary authorities based on existing boundaries. I am concerned about, Derek talked about growing capacity. Why did we need to have an additional bureaucracy? Very unusually for me, I am echoing what Councillor Carr is saying. I never really had much faith in this idea of an elected mayor and a combined authority. We were sold the idea that it would bring in money that really we saw as being legitimately ours. And I have not the slightest doubt, because of the disparate nature of the combined authority, that we shall be fighting like ferrets in a sack to get our share. I know Derek rather smoothed over and said everything was going to be ladylike and gentlemanly. You can tell he's not a politician, obviously. And I just quote one example that I picked up when I sat in the other meeting, when it was talking about distribution of funds for roads. Somebody got in before me and asked, how is this money going to be distributed? And I think the answer came through of the sort that Derek has mentioned this morning. But one of the 2 representatives from Nottingham City Council jumped in and said, Oh no, I don't agree with that. It should be based on the quality, on the state of the roads. So the fact that Nottingham City have let their roads go to rack and ruin now justifies the East Midlands Council putting in a lot of extra money to the detriment of the other members, the other constituent members. So if you think it's going to be all smooth running, then I don't think it's going to be that at all. And I echo what Councillor Guilfoyle said about local member accountability. It's always the case that if somebody's got a problem, they come to the person that they know. It doesn't matter whether it's a county problem, a district problem, a parish problem, and now it will be an East Midlands Council problem, particularly on bus services. And if you think that they're not going to come to the locally elected member to deal with problems they've got and issues they've got with bus services, that they'll go to the mayor and say, Madam Mayor, can you please sort this out for me? Then I'm sorry, but you certainly aren't a politician, obviously. And I think there's a degree of naivety there. It's of great concern for me. I'm afraid that this organisation, growing its capacity, that means just expanding and taking on more staff, is simply remote and inaccessible. I don't know how it's going to be held to account, except every 4 years with a mayoral election. I'm bitterly disappointed that my own government have in effect foisted this upon us when they could quite clearly, as Councillor Carr has said, they could quite clearly have directed that money to unitary authorities based on existing county boundaries, and we could have worked collaboratively as we have done over many, many years. You will recall, Derek, the setting up of the East Midlands Adoption Agency. We didn't need a combined authority to do that. It just needed officers in Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire to get together and, with the city and Derby City and say, hey, wouldn't it be a good idea to have an adoption agency based on those areas? And it's worked very, very well. So that could have been a way forward without this huge remote bureaucracy. I'm extremely concerned about it. And you talked about rail services. Well, Nottinghamshire on its own improved the rail services Robin Hood line. You know, we didn't need a combined authority to do that. And there are other improvements in the pipeline and other things that we can do as well. And if they need to go across the border, we just talk to officers in the other authorities. I'm very sceptical about the whole of this. I think it's going to be sucking money from frontline services to keep an organisation going that never ought to have been set up in the first place. And I blame my own government for that. I certainly do. I'm happy to criticise them. And at the same time, as I would like to see the disappearance of this combined authority, I'd like to see the disappearance of the Cameronesque police and crime commissioners, who in my view are just another complete and utter waste of money and have done nothing to improve the service. Sorry, that's not very positive, but that's how I feel. And I feel better for saying that.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. It's only taken a year for you and Councillor Carr to agree on something. So something positive has come out of this. Christmas, in this Christmas. I've got Councillor Adams.
Thank you. Yeah, just to be absolutely crystal clear for the 3 or 4 people that I'm sure are watching online in the Shire, that as things stand and per normal, they still need to log things through the Nottinghamshire website for any issues related to them. And as we aren't talking about something that's going to happen realistically and fully until 2026, there is no change in the way they do anything as things stand. Because I think what does become incredibly confusing is when we sit in here talking about things that they don't know where to go. And I think that was a point that Councillor Owen made. And they will still come to their elected members, as they should. And they should still go through our website and log anything to do with us, as they should. And similarly with their district councillors, do the same thing. We don't need to add any additional levels of confusion at this stage. So basically, it's as you were until it's directed other ways. And I'm pretty sure as well, Derek, that when a inquiry comes via the Nottinghamshire County Council customer service line, or an inquiry comes via the Nottinghamshire County Council website, as we will direct that as per necessary and help that resident get to the right location. So once again, a point of contact quite clearly still is the 0300 number for us, and similarly with the website as well. So that's good. So there's going to be nobody lost in the ether trying to get where they need to get. They can do that just by following exactly the same things they've been doing for the past 3.5 years since I've been on this authority. Just going back to that as well, I do think that talking about the actual the road side of things, I mean, I know that was very. I know we've got a different mayor to the one that I personally hoped we'd had, and I know a number of others did also. But I know in that initial discussion, the idea of that was to get that money into roads significantly quicker. But obviously, since that we have got somebody different to the person that was presenting that original theory as this authority was in the process of being set up, obviously that money now is coming later. And that's really disappointing, because I'd have loved to see that money in the tarmac straight away, to be honest. And the £20 million that has already come in should have been, in my opinion, directed immediately into the recovery of the roads network and what we need doing, which is our roads repairing, and we need the funding to do that, regardless of which government is in control. And so I'm saddened that we've not seen any of that. And just getting to my actual question, Councillor Elliott, sorry about that, I've rather gone on a bit of a statement joyride there. Just to really say, when will we have that official confirmation that you've talked about this £80 million that's appeared in capital funds for next financial year? When will we have a definitive point where we know where that money is being spent? Because I hope immediately it goes straight into the tarmac. I hope immediately it's responsible for repairing the roads and also the pavements, also amongst other things that are the responsibility within the highways side of things. Is there a date on that? Is it just literally as they release their budget next year, or do we know earlier where that allocation is going to be spent? Because it occurs to me that where has that 20 million gone as well? If it's not gone into roads, it'd be interesting to know if you can just give us an understanding where that £20 million has gone, but also subsequently where the £80 million goes. And just moving back to a slight other point, you can apply on the East Midlands Mayor's website to have her come and visit our meeting. There's a special form on there you can fill out where you can ask her to come and join us for our event. So maybe you could write to her and ask her to come and join us for our event here in Overview. Councillor Elliott, thank you.
I will do that. I'm meeting with her on Thursday as well, and tomorrow. So, Derek, do you want to point up about the 20 million?
Yeah, thank you. And just to make the point around the mayor and accountability, then obviously, as I mentioned in the introduction, is in the paper, EMCCA has its own scrutiny function, and Councillor Elliott, you are the vice chair, I think, of that. The mayor may well choose to attend meetings that she's invited to, but that isn't necessarily to undertake or be part of a scrutiny function, because that is performed inside EMCCA. As far as funding is concerned, then, Councillor Adams, so EMCCA has got capital funding to discharge a range of its responsibilities, not just related to highways, for example. So some of that capital funding will be related to public transport, some of it will be related to housing funding that it's got, and brownfield development funding that it's got as well. And that will be mapped across into next year in terms of the expansion of its funding. Equally, next year, its skills funding responsibilities come on stream as well from September, from the start of the academic year. So there's significant uplift in revenue funding because it will start to discharge its adult skills related funding responsibilities and commissioning responsibilities as well. So that number that we've talked about this morning is not just related to highways or indeed large scale infrastructure. It relates to the totality the capital pots that have been devolved and are being devolved and will be devolved to EMCCA. As far as highways funding is concerned, then EMCCA, like us, is in a little bit of a wait and see space. So, government in the Chancellor in her budget statement announced a £500 million additional investment in highway maintenance in the next year. We at EMCCA have not yet had detailed numbers from the Department for Transport as to what that will look like on a local basis, but the Transport and Connectivity Committee at its last meeting did agree to ensure or to approach that funding on the basis that previous allocations have been made, i.e. To pass over the DFT current funding approach, which is based on road length in large part, as I mentioned earlier. So we wait to see exactly what the precise details of that funding look like. The government, it starts to get a bit complicated now, I'm afraid. So the government has also indicated to us that, to the region, that we should be able to access something called City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement, and that's in two phases. We're absolutely, as a combined authority, in a space where CRSTS2 will be applied to the East Midlands from 26-27. EMCCA are keen to see if we can draw down some of that money earlier. And a number of the candidates in the mayoral election were in that sort of space. But it's been indicated to EMCCA that we might also be able to access, and EMCCA has written to government requesting access to CRSTS1. And government has announced some overall funding for that for next year, but we're not cited yet on what that will look like in terms of an allocation for EMCCA. Some of that funding can absolutely be spent on highway condition, highway maintenance and improvement, structural maintenance and improvement. But some of it is also likely to be intended for broader schemes as well. So we're still in a place where we need to wait and see what detail emerges from government over the coming weeks. We've got the local government financial settlement due in a couple of weeks' time, and hopefully there may be some announcements that are linked to that. But it may be the case that with some of our broader infrastructure ambitions, members mentioned the 614, for example, that we might have to wait until the spending review in March and afterwards to get more clarity on that. And EMCCA in that space is in the same position as the county council are. We're kind of waiting for government announcements.
Just on what happened to the 20 million, that was all. I'll just ask them. I don't know if you've got that data available to you.
I'm trying to ascertain which 20 million we.
You said there was a 20 million initial capital receipt that the East Midlands Combined Authority had.
So yes, the government. So I think you're talking there, Mike, about the 39 million pounds annual pot that the government has awarded to EMCCA as part of its deal, which is 50% revenue, 50% capital. So the board's proposed will consider at its meeting on the 16th of December proposals to invest about 9.5 of that in a range of infrastructure projects, and I mentioned STEP as being one of those potentially. As far as the remainder of that capital is concerned, some of it is going to be carried forward, I think, into the next financial year, and that reflects the nature of the start-up position that we've discussed for EMCCA. And I think some of it has been invested in some of the initiatives that relate to some of the other things that I've mentioned this morning, housing, brownfield investment, and so on. There is a detailed budget paper in the papers for the EMCCA board on the 16th that articulates its Q2 budget position and also its draft budget for next year as well. So further detail is available in there. But it is absolutely the case that EMCCA has not utilised all of its available capital this year because it's been in that start-up phase, and it's a legitimate question, therefore, to ask about could that have been utilised on activities that were ready to go, if you like.
Councillor Kerry, come in with your question.
Thank you, Chairman. However, what I've been asked has already been asked, but I just want to say that I need assurance that any of the money coming down through EMCCA isn't going to help bail out authorities that have not had the same excellent financial management that we have through Nigel Stevenson and just on the other side. Very dangerous. The other thing is about transport and strategy, and that is the Midland Main Line, which we've been fighting for a long time, the electrification. I know it's getting towards less than that, but we really would like to see that improving. However, there are consequences of that with increased line speeds, which impacts on both road and foot crossings. The issue of those is, so it's got improved transport, it helps net zero, health and communities. If we start to close rail crossings, I know that's something at the moment this council will look at. I don't know how that impacts on EMCCA and what work it does, but we don't want to lose some of the footpaths, that kind of stuff, the easy to use footpaths, etc., as a consequence of improving the rail. So I just wanted to make that statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kerry. Glenn, did you want to come back?
Yeah, just on. I mean, at the end of the day, I think you concentrated a little bit, Councillor Adams, on highways in relation to, and I think when you look at the core asks and aims that the county council as a whole has asked, you know, from my point of view, I can support them. You know, it's not just about highways; it's about, you know, education, skills, economic growth, culture and tourism right across the board. So I think, you know, yeah, I know there are issues and there are major issues on roads that we want to do. Some of those have been there, like the 614, for years. Probably waiting another year, yeah, causes a problem, but it's not as big a problem as what we've got in some of where we need to get the youth back to work and some of the lack of skills that we've got. And if we want to improve properties, the number of house building and etc., then we need those skills and people with the skills, because there is a skill deficit currently locally, well, and nationally. So, you know, for me, I'm hoping that there's a mix of things that come out of EMCCA, all touching the strands that we've put in there. And, you know, I suppose in reality, you know, the former leader did try, wasn't successful, and he's been to Lincolnshire and he tried there and he weren't very successful. So clearly, I think the people have had the mandate. They didn't want Mr. Bradley. But you know, I just wish EMCCA well. Probably whether I like it or not as a structure, it's there. So we've got to work with it and we've got to take advantage and get the best we can for the county of Nottinghamshire.
Right. Yeah, we've got to embed ourselves within and get us a good deal. So it's been a good debate. Everyone's had a bit of a say. We've got one issue that can be for the members hub, so we're going to do that work on that. So the link for EMCCA for us for our personal use. Okay, everyone happy with that? We'll go to the vote then. All in favour of the recommendation?
Just for noting.
Just for noting. Okay. So with that, this is our last meeting before Christmas. I wish you all a Merry Christmas and prosperous.
We have got the AI session on.
Oh, we've got an AI session. Yeah. An AI session. So, okay. But with that, I'll close the meeting. Thank you.